any of the duration of any of the funds that's being used to fund it.
All right, let me jump in, because you're describing what some would call a problem of duration risk. And in the case of central banks, they've got a lot of debt on their books. They say they can unwind. Bernanke says he can unwind in 15 minutes. But during these past few years, they've changed the composure of the debts on their books, so that they are now of different maturities than they were a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And in fact, it's not the same debt on the way out as it is on the way in.
No, of course.
And I would use the analogy of, if you were to swallow whole a porcupine, the quills are facing out as you swallow. So it goes down relatively easily if you're trying to swallow a porcupine. But then pulling it out, the quills are now going the wrong direction, and that's your duration risk. I realize it's a bit of a poetic attempt to describe this, but how would you build on that?
The problem with our economy, apart from fiat credit, is the fact that we don't match maturities of assets and liabilities properly. So that's exactly that. So when they say, oh, we're just going to keep the balance sheet at a steady 350 billion, it implies that there's no flux going on there. But you've got bonds expiring, and they'll need to, by definition, reinvest those proceeds. Otherwise, the balance sheet will shrink. So to say that we're going to keep it at a constant level, oh, and then we're doing this thing where we're selling our short-term bonds and buying, well, you have to do that. You have to keep on pushing out the time. Because if you own, let's say, a 5-year bond, if you own £1 billion worth of bonds with a 5-year maturity, but you want to keep them for 10 years, you're going to be in a quandary at some point. What do? You'll have to create £5 billion worth, £1 billion worth of bonds at that expiry just to keep this whole charade going.
Okay, so we're describing that the Fed takes on a lot of debts, and then they essentially process those debts in a debt processor called the Federal Reserve Bank, and they turn into something very different than what they started at. And the idea of exiting is vastly more complicated than we are led to believe. Now, the way this shows up kind of in the, let's say, the economy that people see, the visible economy, is that, of course, these debts overlap to a great degree the bonds that are held on various banks' balance sheets. And these bonds on various banks' balance sheets are priced at par. They're held in the books at 100 cents on the dollar. But if we're saying that the credit on the Fed's books is impaired, and in fact it's nowhere near what they say it is, then pari passu, to use a banking term, with that statement, we can say that the bank's bonds on their balance sheet is equally impaired, and that the problem with letting the debts on the Fed's or the Bank of England's books expire, disappear, is that you have a mirror effect in the banking sector, which then will have to come clean and say, you know what, our book value is not what we say it is, our balance sheet is not what we say it is, we are in fact technically insolvent, our stock shouldn't be worth 160 billion like JP Morgan, it should be worth 0.
You're right. I mean, they're not going to unwind this scheme for a very long time. I think of the order at least another 5 more years, if not a decade.
Now we already see in the UK prices moving up for stuff that people buy. When they go to the shops, food, energy, education, these are moving up. At what point do you have a situation where the inflation, even if you substitute horse meat for cow meat and sell it at the same price, it becomes so outrageous that, you know, in this country they had the poll tax riots not too long ago, and people, they went out on the street and they rioted seriously. Remember, you have it in you, British people. You can do it if you think, you know, if you try. Poll tax riots were an example of something good, not bad. But what about this inflation? Is it going to...
Well, I mean, you have to think about the median person and what the median person consumes. And if you look at what, and generalizing here obviously, but the median, what the median person consumes, you're not sort of seeing this 10% per annum price rise yet. I mean, a McDonald's Happy Meal hasn't gone up 10% on the year before. Okay, but let's
we'll get back to that in a second. But let's look at McDonald's for a second, because they just announced they're hiring 2,500 new employees in the UK. At the same time, a very high-end investment bank is laying off 1,000 employees. Those 1,000 employees were making probably 5 to 10 times at least more than the McDonald's worker. Now, on one hand, you can say, well, you've got more jobs, and the government says this all the time. We have more jobs in this economy. David Cameron in the House of Commons will say, oh, 1 million more jobs. But they're minimum wage jobs, or they're temporary jobs, or part-time jobs. Do these part-time minimum wage jobs generate enough taxable income to make a dent in the outstanding debt of this country?
No, I would imagine... This is a part of a whole shift to becoming a servile economy. You know, if you don't do anything yourself, then you have to be a servant to someone who does something. Okay,
let's get back to the other question about inflation for a second. The experience of people on the high streets is different than 2% annualized inflation. They are buying, obviously, in the forecourts of the petrol stations, they're buying petrol at a higher price that's gone up considerably over the past few years. The government doesn't really include that in their RPI calculations. Price of food, there's a lot of substitution going on. They're substituting, let's say, again, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but they're replacing beef with dead horses because it's cheaper. That's inflation. We saw the same thing during Roman times when they clipped the coins. That's inflation.
Well, they're changing the composition of the basket to suit their ends.
Okay, so so you were saying a moment ago that the average person doesn't experience the higher inflation.
No. They wouldn't, let's say, be experiencing education fees going up sort of 10–15% year on year. They're obviously experiencing it, but they're not experiencing it to the degree that other people might be experiencing it. But there will be a point, there has to be a point, where, I hope there's a point, where they do stop and say, well, what the hell are we doing?
Well, I think, if I may, I think what you're saying is it's becoming normalized.
It is becoming normalized.
So they're becoming desensitized to this deflation. Okay, we got 20 seconds to go. Let's talk currency wars. Let's talk Japan. They've obviously debased. And the China and Korea are pissed off about it. And they're actually getting, it looks like they're in a war, on a war footing. Japan, you know, these two, they don't like each other. So Japan is saying, "F you, we're taking our yen down." Some are positing that Japan will be the first into the currency debasement vortex of hyperinflation.
The Japanese mindset isn't to cause that kind of problem.
But they're kamikazes. I mean, not to say that they're all kamikazes. I don't want to make that assertion.
In
that
attitude,
Japanese people equals kamikaze. But we're the suicide bombers and warriors that come to kamikaze is a Japanese word. Push comes to shove, they will kamikaze currency themselves.
You've got a very deferential society in Japan. So if the population felt that they wanted to get rid of their yen, that is just, in hyperinflation, you just want to exchange your currencies as quickly as you have them. I don't...
Strap on the headband with the big red dot and go fly your currency into the Pacific Ocean, because that's the only way you're going to get out of this mess. All right, Sandeep Jaitley, we're out of time. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks, mate.
All right, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank my guest, Sandeep Jaitley of Fiketa Research. If you'd like to contact us, please tweet us at Keiser Report or at facebook.com/Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.